Hey guys, tonight we step into a cloud of cool grey mist that seems to have rolled in, specifically to make you feel like you've wandered into the opening scene of a Victorian novel. The platform under your feet hums gently. Not because a train is arriving, don't worry. You probably won't survive trying to outrun one of those Victorian engines, but because the whole station is waking up, stretching itself with the creak of wooden beams and the soft groan of cast iron rails. A lantern flickers overhead, turning the fog into a warm, golden haze. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know your location and your current local time. I'd love to see where everyone's listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take a cautious step forward, boots tapping against the platform planks, and the mist swirls away just enough for you to see the station master. He stands at the far end like a polished exclamation mark, upright posture, crisp uniform, and a ledger so large it looks like it could double as a shield in a medieval reenactment. He doesn't see you yet. His attention is fixed on the horizon, listening for trains the same way sailors listen for shifts in the tide. The fog curls around you like a curious cat, brushing against your coat, settling on your eyelashes. Victorian mist always behaves as if it has dramatic intentions. It's practically a character on its own. You breathe in, and the air tastes faintly of coal dust, damp wood, and the metallic promise of engines that have not yet arrived. As you walk closer, you notice something odd. The station feels restful, almost peaceful. Nobody's panicking about arrivals or departures. No frantic passengers are sprinting down the platform with too many bags and too few brain cells. Instead, the whole place seems to be stretching, taking its time, easing into the day in slow, quiet layers. The station master finally turns. His face is lined with the kind of experience that only comes from decades of soot, timetables, and trying to explain to angry passengers that no, he cannot physically make the train reappear just because they overslept. But more importantly, his hands cradle that ledger as though he's holding a living creature, one he feeds daily with ink and numbers and small, precise notes. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your mind as you inch closer. Victorian station masters really did rely on ledgers far more than the elegant printed timetables we tend to romanticize today. Those big bound books were the backbone of early railway organization: passenger counts, cargo weights, train delays, staff assignments, even coal consumption. Everything lived inside those pages. But there's also a fringe tidbit, something you wouldn't expect. Some station masters swore that their ledgers spoke to them, pages that fell open to the right entry, ink that seemed to dry in meaningful patterns, margins that warned of mistakes. Completely unscientific. But let's be honest, if you spent 30 years writing in the same book, you'd probably start assigning it personality traits too. The station master flips the ledger open with the soft rustle of thick paper. You can't see what's written inside yet, but you hear the satisfying thump as it settles. He nods at you, giving that subtle Victorian greeting that basically means, "You look lost, but harmless enough." "Fog's thicker today," he murmurs, almost to himself. His voice is calm, steady, the kind that could guide a ship through a storm or convince an irate duchess that arriving late is simply part of the grand experience. He gestures for you to follow him toward the tiny office built beside the platform. The door creaks open like it has participated in 1,000 such mornings. Inside, the space is warmer, filled with soft lamplight, resin-polished wood, and the faint scent of paper that has absorbed 50 years of human worries. The fog presses gently against the window, giving the room a muffled quiet that feels almost sacred. The station master places his ledger on the desk and smooths the cover with the same tenderness someone might use when smoothing the fur of a beloved old dog. Historians still argue whether this almost obsessive affection for paperwork was cultural, personal, or simply a coping mechanism for Victorian chaos. But one thing becomes clear as you stand there, letting the misty morning settle into your bones. This ledger isn't just an object, it's a ritual, a routine, a lifeline. And as the station breathes slowly around you, you realize this is where your journey begins, not with trains roaring through fog, but with quiet pages, careful ink strokes, and the calm heartbeat of a world that runs on order. You stay standing beside the stationmaster's desk for a moment, letting the warmth of the little office seep into your gloves and coat. Victorian winters are charming if you enjoy numb fingers and the occasional existential dread brought on by coal smoke. But inside this office, this tiny wooden sanctuary nestled between steel rails and drifting fog, you feel something gentler, almost like the building itself exhales once the ledger is opened. The stationmaster gestures toward a narrow chair across from him. It creaks softly as you sit, clearly a veteran of hundreds of early morning ledger sessions. He doesn't speak right away. Instead, he performs a small ritual of settling, straightening the ledger, aligning his pen beside it, dusting the corner of the desk with a practiced swipe. You get the distinct impression that the ledger must feel welcome before work can begin. Finally, he looks up. "This," he says, tapping the leather-bound cover, "is the only thing keeping the trains honest." You blink. That's a dramatic statement, even by Victorian standards, which, to be fair, had a flair for dramatic statements. But as he opens the ledger again, its thick pages, glowing under lamplight, you see why he says it with such reverence. Inside, the handwriting is immaculate. Even the margins look like they do Pilates. Passenger tallies, cargo lists, times of departure, times of arrival, the number of sheep on platform 2, last Tuesday, which raises more questions than answers. Every detail is recorded as cleanly as if the fate of the British Empire depended on it. Which, in a way, it did. The Victorian rail network was the artery system of an industrial giant, and stationmasters were its pulse keepers. A mainstream historical fact floats easily to mind. Railways in the 19th century were so new, so sprawling, and so prone to chaos that accuracy wasn't just helpful, it was vital. Before the invention of standardized time, yes, that was a thing we didn't always have. Each town had its own local clock, so train schedules were basically exercises in intercity diplomacy. Ledgers became anchors of sanity. The stationmaster turns another page, and you notice faint indentations from past entries, pressed deep, as if every stroke of the pen carried weight beyond mere ink. You run a finger gently along the edge of a sheet and feel its thickness, warmer where the lamplight touches it. People look at the trains, the stationmaster murmurs. But this, he taps the page, is what runs the railway. He doesn't smile, but there's a softness in his voice. Pride, maybe, or affection. You can almost imagine the ledger purring. He points to a log of arriving freight. Barrels of ale delayed by fog 3 days ago. I noted it here. The brewery expects compensation. The customer complains. The railway accountant sighs into his soup. But this shows what truly happened. The ledger becomes, suddenly, not just a book, but a witness, a judge, a historian, a very quiet but extremely opinionated co-worker. Then the stationmaster leans slightly toward you and lowers his voice as if sharing a secret. Some say the ledger remembers more than we do. You raise an eyebrow. He nods toward a peculiar smudge in the margin, like a fingerprint made of ink, left behind by my predecessor. Appears on days when the bookkeeping was particularly lively. A quirky tidbit surfaces from your reading. Some Victorian stationmasters believed their ledgers absorbed the emotional climate of the station. Stress, calm, confusion, triumph, leaving marks, smudges, or oddly shaped ink pools. Entirely unscientific, but when you stare at the faint walls of ink, you kind of get the appeal. Outside, the faint whistle of a distant engine curls through the fog. The stationmaster doesn't flinch. Instead, he calmly writes a new line in the ledger. 7:42 a.m. Whistle heard. Train approaching from the north. Does he need to write it down? Probably not. Will he anyway? Absolutely. This man would write down his own breathing pattern if he thought it might help keep trains running on time. He pauses, pen lifted, listening. Historians still argue whether the devotion Victorian stationmasters had to these ledgers was purely practical or gently spiritual, some blend of duty, obsession, and quiet companionship. Whatever the truth, you can feel it now. The ledger isn't just a record. It's a partner in a world that refuses to slow down. The stationmaster closes the book gently, not like he's done with it, but as if he's giving it a moment to rest. You sense the day beginning to stir outside the settling fog, the gathering passengers, the distant clatter of wooden crates. Soon, the platform will grow busier, louder, more demanding. But for now, in this warm pocket of lamplight and leather-bound calm, you understand why Victorian stationmasters loved their ledgers. Because in a world of steam and speed and unpredictable human behavior, the ledger was steady, faithful. Retin, your eyes drift back to the cover, and you swear the leather gleams a little brighter, like it knows it's just received a fresh admirer. You barely have time to absorb the quiet power radiating from the ledger before the stationmaster shifts into his next ritual, one so practiced, so precise, it feels as natural to him as breathing. He reaches into a small drawer beneath the desk and extracts a narrow wooden box. The lid slides open with a soft hiss, revealing rows of quills trimmed to immaculate points and a stoppered bottle of ink as dark as midnight coal. He lifts the bottle with both hands, the way someone might lift a chalice during a sacred ceremony. And honestly, it kind of is. Victorian ink wasn't just ink. It was a lifeline, a commitment, the thing standing between a well-run station and utter logistical meltdown. He pours a small amount into a shallow ceramic inkwell slowly, reverently, as though each drop contains a train's destiny. You watch him swirl the ink with a glass stick, coaxing it into an even texture. The lamplight glints off its surface. For a moment, it almost looks alive. Cold mornings make the ink sluggish, he murmurs. It likes to be woken gently. You blink. You're not entirely sure he's joking. A mainstream historical fact gently pops into your mind as he continues stirring. Victorian ink really did behave differently depending on temperature. Cold made it thick and stubborn. Heat made it run. Stationmasters and clerks often warmed their ink near lamps or tucked it inside waistcoat pockets like little pets that needed emotional support. When he's satisfied, the stationmaster dips the tip of a quill and tests it on a scrap of paper. The lines come out smooth, clean, obedient. He nods with quiet approval, then hands the scrap to you. You hold it up, considering the graceful loop of his lettering. Well, he says, the page is ready. Now the mind must follow. He clears his throat, straightens his shoulders, and closes his eyes. You expect a deep meditation or a philosophical moment of Victorian existentialism. Instead, he hums softly, rhythmically, like a kettle preparing to boil. The vibrations fill the warmly lit room with a strangely soothing energy. You bite back a smile, but he cracks an eye open. If surgeons can warm their hands before cutting, he says calmly, I can warm my voice before tallying. A fair point. Also a mildly alarming comparison. Still humming, he opens his ledger again and inhales. The day begins, he whispers, and dips the quill. You watch as he writes the first entry. 8 a.m. Station opened. Fog heavy but lifting. His handwriting is steady but relaxed, looping confidently across the page. He makes it look easy, but you can feel the concentration in the air, as tangible as the faint scent of ink. A quirky tidbit stirs faintly at the back of your memory. Some Victorian stationmasters believed that the first entry of the day determined the tone of the next 12 hours. Write neatly, and the trains would behave. Write sloppily, and chaos was guaranteed. Total superstition, but given how many things could go wrong with steam locomotives, telegraph relays, and impulsive passengers, you can't blame them for trying to manifest good luck one ink stroke at a time. As the stationmaster continues writing, his hum shifts subtly, sometimes high, sometimes low, always calm. It reminds you of wind slipping through brass pipes, or maybe of someone trying to soothe the universe into cooperating for just a few hours. He pauses, tapping the quill lightly against the edge of the ledger. Ink should never feel rushed, he says. People can hurry, trains can hurry, but ink must not. Outside, wheels clatter faintly against metal as someone pushes a barrow across the platform. The station is waking up for real now. A distant cough, a soft conversation, the shuffle of boots against wood. But in here, the rhythm remains slow, measured, intentional. The stationmaster glances at the window. Fog's lifting enough for the first train. We'll note that too. He writes another line. Visibility improving. Expect arrival shortly. You can't explain it, but each entry makes the world feel more grounded, like events only become real once written in this book. Historians still argue whether the near-devotional rituals around ink and writing tools were quirks of Victorian personality or necessary counterweights to the unpredictability of early rail travel. But whatever the reason, you're beginning to understand the appeal. Watching the stationmaster work feels like watching someone tune reality itself until it runs smoothly. He dips the quill once more, then places it aside with a satisfied nod. Ink is prepared. Hands are warm. Ledger is listening. Listening. You glance at the book again. The pages sit still, but somehow you can feel their attention quiet, steady, welcoming. The stationmaster stands, smoothing his vest. Come, he says. We must greet the morning passengers. The ledger will wait. It always does. And as you follow him out of the office, stepping back into the thinning mist, you realize the day has truly begun, not with a whistle or a train, but with ink, breath, and ritual. You step back onto the mist-softened platform with the stationmaster, the fog shifting like a curtain being slowly drawn aside for the day's performance. The wooden planks beneath your boots feel slightly damp, and somewhere in the rafters above, a pigeon coos with the energy of someone who absolutely did not read the Victorian memo about keeping things quiet until the first train actually arrives. The stationmaster doesn't mind. His calm is anchored, steady, fortified by ink and ritual. He takes his place near the platform edge, ledger tucked under one arm like a prized violin. He closes his eyes for a moment, not in meditation, but in concentration, and then begins murmuring numbers under his breath. At 8:10, 9 passengers departing. At 8:42, 3 arriving with cargo. At 9:15, empty return coach. By noon, 37 souls and 2 pigs. He recites each detail in a tone so soft it barely stirs the air. You almost laugh. It's like hearing someone whisper sweet nothings to a timetable. But this is no idle muttering. It's the arithmetic whispering ritual, a quiet repetition meant to organize the day in his mind. The words flow in gentle cadence, matching the rhythm of his breath. You notice how the fog seems to settle as he speaks, as if even the atmosphere finds his calm reassuring. A mainstream historical fact slips easily into the moment. In early railway days, stationmasters were responsible for tracking passenger numbers manually, often without telegraphs or synchronized clocks. Memorizing the expected flow of the day was not only practical, it was essential. If the mind faltered, the trains would follow. The station master exhales deeply, as if sealing the numbers into memory with one long breath. He opens his eyes again and glances at you. A station master's mind must run ahead of the trains, he says softly. Else the rails will outrun the man. He steps closer to the platform signage, tracing the painted letters with a gloved fingertip. You get the sense he's rehearsing routes as if reciting a favorite poem. His voice drops to a murmur again. London to Brighton, Brighton to Lewes, Lewes to Polegate. He pauses. Polegate to a very confused cow they once found blocking the tracks. You snort before you can help yourself. He allows a rare flicker of amusement. Then he resumes, whispering the transitions between stations like a litany of small prayers. A quirky tidbit bubbles into your mind. Some Victorian station masters believed that speaking the stations aloud kept the railway spirits content, ensuring smooth travel and fewer delays. Railway spirits probably weren't real, but considering how often locomotives broke down, whistled at odd hours, or terrified livestock, you can see why people thought they might have personalities. As he finishes his murmured recitation, he straightens again. His face shifts from gentle focus to serene readiness, a man prepared for anything the rails might throw at him, or at least prepared to record it tidily in his ledger. He leads you toward the center of the platform. The fog continues lifting, letting through thin beams of pale morning light that streak across the station roof. A few early passengers appear: a woman in a stiff bonnet, clutching a knitted shawl, a porter hauling a crate marked fragile, probably lying, a young man with the anxious air of someone pretending not to run late. The station master watches them all with quiet interest. Not judgment, not stress, just awareness. He pulls out a pocket watch, polishes the glass with a handkerchief, and checks the time. Then he snaps it shut. Train due in 5 minutes, he murmurs. Give or take the whims of steam. A distant rumble agrees with him. It's faint, like a memory of thunder. The platform boards vibrate subtly beneath your feet. Passengers perk up. The pigeon above grows louder, offering unsolicited commentary. The station master breathes once more, steady and slow, grounding himself. Numbers are ready. Mind is ready. Ledger is ready. Historians still argue whether these murmured arithmetic rituals were personal quirks or widely adopted habits among station masters. Some believe they were coping mechanisms. Others think they were mnemonic devices disguised as meditative routines. But standing here, wrapped in fog and the smell of distant coal, you understand the truth. These whispers weren't just for memory. They were for comfort. They were anchors in a world powered by steam, soot, and unpredictability. The rumble grows stronger. Passengers shuffle. You feel a ripple of energy anticipation, mixed with Victorian restraint. And through it all, the station master remains still, centered, breathing numbers under his breath like a soft chorus only he can hear. The rails begin to sing with the approaching engine. You glance at the station master. He nods once. The day truly begins now. And as the train emerges through the thinning fog, you realize that nothing, absolutely nothing, moves this man more than a ledger full of numbers that finally match the world unfolding before him. The whistle slices through the thinning fog with that uniquely Victorian mix of drama and inconvenience, loud enough to announce something important is happening, shrill enough to remind you why earplugs should have been invented sooner. The train rolls into view, its iron body gleaming beneath a sheen of moisture, its wheels hissing as they meet the rails. Steam blooms outward in a white, theatrical burst, like the locomotive is arriving on stage slightly late, but fully committed to its entrance. Passengers straighten, porters hustle. Even the pigeon above gives a surprised flap, as though it forgot trains existed. But not the station master. He stands poised at the platform's edge, ledger under one arm, gloved hand lifted just slightly, in greeting elegant, calm, unflappable. The way he holds himself, you'd think he was the one keeping the entire railway system running through sheer willpower. Honestly, you're starting to suspect he might be. The train slows with a grumble and a hiss, its massive form settling beside the platform. Doors clatter open. Warm breath from inside spills out coal-scented, human-scented, just slightly chaotic-scented. But before the passengers rush out, the station master does something subtle. He taps the ledger's cover twice. You almost miss it. 2 soft taps, like the beat of a small drum. Anchoring, he murmurs. So the routes stay clear in my mind. He might be teasing, or not. At this point, you've accepted that this man has a deeper emotional relationship with his ledger than most Victorians had with their spouses. A mainstream historical fact floats gently through the moment. Victorian station masters were often required to memorize large portions of the railway routes, not just the stations, but the junctions, gradients, hazards, and even the tendencies of certain trains. Timetable books existed, but they were bulky, frequently outdated, and often less reliable than the people running the station. The station master watches the first passengers step down, a woman with 7 layers of petticoats and one very determined expression, a shopkeeper carrying 3 boxes and 0 sense of balance, a gentleman clutching a newspaper like it personally offended him, a child whose sole mission is to chase pigeons indefinitely. As each person passes, the station master's eyes flick with the precision of someone mentally logging every arrival. Not writing yet, just memorizing. This way, he says softly to you, you'll want to see how the next ritual works. He leads you a few steps down the platform to a painted sign listing station names and connections. At first it seems ordinary, just neat lettering on wood, but then you see the small marks etched beside each destination. Tiny strokes, scratches, dots so faint you nearly miss them. These, he explains, brushing his fingers across the markings, are reminders. He taps one scratch. This means the morning train is often late from that direction. He taps another. This means the afternoon cargo tends to carry fragile goods. A dot at the bottom. This marks a day when no passengers boarded at all. A double scratch. 2 gentlemen once got into an argument here about the correct number of teaspoons required for civil society. You blink. And who won? No one. The tea went cold. The scratches and dots form their own map, something between a memory palace and a visual code. You start to see how the station master's mind works. Keeping the railway moving isn't just logistics. It's intuition, familiarity, small rituals that keep the chaos threaded neatly together. A quirky tidbit surfaces in your memory. Some Victorian station masters were known for having walking maps, in their heads complete pictorial layouts of routes, signals, nearby towns, and even livestock patterns. They claimed the maps grew sharper each time they looked at real ones, as if their minds stitched tiny details into a living mental diagram. The station master nods slowly at the sign, adjusting one barely visible mark with his glove. A timetable printed on paper is one thing, he says, but a timetable carried in the mind, that's far more reliable. Then he looks at you with a conspiratorial glint, also far less likely to be stolen by passing goats. You stare, he doesn't blink. Wind sweeps across the platform, carrying the smell of burning coal and damp wool. Passengers shuffle. Porters call orders to one another. Someone somewhere drops a suitcase with an impressively Victorian thud. Through it all, the station master stands serene, reciting routes under his breath again, letting them settle like threads woven into the day's fabric. Historians still argue whether this level of route memorization was necessary or just cultural pride, but there's no argument about one thing. Station masters were the living timetables of the Victorian world. A conductor approaches, tipping his hat. All clear? The station master nods. Clear and logged. That last word matters. Logged. Into the ledger, yes, but also into his mind, etched by ritual, whispers, and those curious little marks on the sign. The conductor returns to the train. Doors slam. The whistle screams. The engine grumbles into motion, rolling slowly away. As the train disappears into the thinning fog, the station master closes his eyes for a brief moment, breathing in deeply. Another route completed. Another memory anchored. He opens his eyes again and turns to you with quiet certainty. Now, he says, let's return to the ledger. It's waiting, and somehow, you feel the ledger is waiting quietly, patiently, like a friend eager to hear how the morning unfolded. You follow the station master back toward the center of the platform, where the air now hums with the soft aftermath of the departing train. The fog has thinned into wisps that cling to the roof beams and drift lazily across the tracks, as if reluctant to let the morning go. The station master, ledger tucked under his arm again, walks with the steady precision of a man who has seen thousands of trains arrive and depart, yet still treats each one like a polite guest in need of gentle supervision. As you move closer to the platform edge, a subtle shift happens. Porters begin aligning themselves. Passengers form hesitant queues. A woman smooths her coat. A man adjusts his hat. It's like watching a dance begin quiet, synchronized, faintly elegant. The Victorian Railway Ballet. The station master lifts a small hand signal. Nothing dramatic, just a simple wooden paddle with a green circle painted on it. But he holds it with such calm command that the entire station seems to respond. This is the choreography of platform etiquette. With a smooth sweep of his arm, he guides a porter to shift a crate away from the track. With a gentle nod, he encourages a hesitant elderly couple to move toward a bench. A subtle glance sends a wayward child back toward their parent. Not a word spoken, not a whistle blown. Authority through serenity. A mainstream historical fact floats into your awareness. Victorian station masters were not flashy or loud. They were expected to maintain order through politeness, presence, and an almost theatrical sense of composure. The more chaotic the railway grew, the calmer they were meant to appear. Passengers trusted their quiet confidence more than any shouted command. And the station master beside you is a masterpiece of that tradition. He continues gesturing, the motions so fluid they look rehearsed. His coat sways slightly with each pivot, and his boots make soft, rhythmic taps on the planks. You can almost hear music in the motions, though maybe that's just your imagination, trying to romanticize the fact that a man is essentially conducting human traffic with eyebrow raises and paddle swings. A porter rushes by, carrying a large box labeled clock parts. Fragile. The box tilts. The porter wobbles. You prepare for disaster, but the station master simply lifts 2 fingers in a gesture that somehow conveys steady yourself, or face the wrath of 19th century timetables. The porter instantly stabilizes. You exhale. Does that always work? Usually, the station master replies. Victorians fear nothing, except disappointing a man with a ledger. You believe him. The next movement in the platform ballet begins. Signaling. You notice he never signals early, never late. Only at the precise second, when a gesture becomes necessary, his arm rises at the moment a carriage door slams shut. His paddle lifts exactly when the conductor glances for confirmation. He angles his body slightly toward the track, as if aligning himself with the rail's invisible energy. A quirky tidbit flickers through your mind. Some Victorians claimed station masters could feel trains approaching through the vibrations in the planks, a kind of sixth sense developed over years of habit and proximity to steam. Was it true? Hard to say. But when the station master places a gloved hand lightly against a post, eyes half closed, you start to suspect there's something to it. He turns back to you, lowering the paddle. Movements must be predictable, he says. Passengers find comfort in patterns. Trains, too. You're not entirely sure trains can feel comfort, but you let that one go. The quiet ballet continues. A man with an oversized suitcase hesitates at the ramp. The station master drifts toward him, offering a steadying hand without breaking stride. A group of schoolchildren whisper excitedly, and he gives them a gentle expression that says, "Quiet enthusiasm, only, please." A vendor selling meat pies attempts to sneak too close to the track, and the station master subtly steers him away with the grace of a ballroom partner. Historians still argue whether this platform etiquette evolved naturally or was meticulously trained into station masters by railway companies. Some say it developed organically as stations grew busier. Others insist instruction manuals described gestures, tones, even facial expressions. Whatever the truth, the ballet works. You feel calmer just watching it. Then, as the platform settles again, the station master moves his paddle in one smooth downward arc, closing the invisible curtain on the scene. Passengers disperse. Porters tidy crates. The fog softens once more. You realize you haven't heard him raise his voice even once. Not even a little. His power is entirely in how he moves. He turns to you with a slight smile. "Ink orders the day," he says. But etiquette carries it. You follow him as he walks toward the station office again. The railway seems to breathe in time with his footsteps. Everything feels oddly synchronized. Even the pigeon has stopped its commentary, as though acknowledging the quiet authority of the man who never needs to shout. As you step back into the soft warmth of the office, the ledger waits patiently on the desk, silent, sturdy, loyal, and you realize something very Victorian and very true. Some men commanded empires, some commanded armies, but station masters, they commanded peace on platforms where chaos should have reigned. The office door closes behind you with a soft wooden sigh, shutting out the drifting fog and the low murmur of porters rearranging crates. Inside, the lamplight glows warm and buttery, brushing against the ledger's leather spine like an old friend greeting another old friend. The station master sets the ledger down with great ceremony. If he had a velvet pillow, he would absolutely be using it, and immediately reaches for a chipped porcelain teapot, resting on a side shelf. Steam curls from its spout. The smell of strong Victorian tea fills the tiny room, malty, earthy, the kind of brew designed to wake the dead, or at least persuade them to finish their shift before haunting anyone. The station master gestures for you to sit. "We take tea," he says, before the second wave of numbers. He pours into two slightly mismatched cups. The liquid is so dark, it looks like it could stain your soul if you stare at it too long. "Biscuits?" he asks, holding out a tin. The biscuits inside are plain, dry, and shaped like small tiles, Victorian delicacies that have the texture of chalk and the flavor profile of additional chalk. Still, you take one politely. It crumbles in your hand with all the enthusiasm of a tired brick. The station master dunks his into the tea. "Softens the experience," he explains. "This, apparently, is part of the ritual. Not the caffeine, not the sugar, not the conversation, the dunking. It has the energy of an ancient custom passed through generations of train supervisors. A mainstream historical fact drifts easily into your mind. Victorian rail employees often relied on strong tea more than any other stimulant, even more than coffee or alcohol. Tea breaks were woven into the rhythm of the workday, especially during long shifts that required sharp observation and calm endurance. Station masters, in particular, were known for treating tea as both refreshment and fortification. The station master takes a sip. You watch his shoulders relax, his expression soften. For a moment, he looks less like a guardian of the timetables and more like someone simply enjoying the pause between tasks. And that's when the gossip begins. You weren't expecting gossip, but apparently, Victorian station masters possessed a near Olympian talent for relaying information about absolutely everyone who had ever walked onto a platform, even the goats. "Did you see the man with the newspaper?" he asks. You nod. He always pretends to be upset about current events, but I've seen him fall asleep standing up. That is not a man reading politics. That is a man hiding from his mother-in-law. You nearly choke on your tea. And the vendor who keeps edging too close to the tracks. His meat pies are half pastry, half mystery. I once opened one, and genuinely feared the mystery might open me back. He sips calmly. The conversation drifts from passengers to trains, from trains to weather, from weather to the strange phenomenon of telegraph operators who insist on tapping out gossip faster than proper railway messages. It feels like sitting in the calm eye of a railway storm, listening to someone who holds the world together complain lovingly about the odd, unpredictable characters who inhabit it. A quirky tidbit floats into your thoughts. Some Victorian stationmasters kept informal gossip ledgers, tiny notebooks hidden in drawers, where they jotted down amusing anecdotes, odd complaints, and memorable encounters. None were official, and surviving examples are rare, but the ones historians have found are absolute comedic gold. Your stationmaster absolutely seems like the type to have one. He opens the main ledger again, not to write, but to rest his hand on it as he talks. You start noticing he touches the ledger the way some people touch a pet, softly, absently, affectionately. He offers you another biscuit, which you decline politely to avoid a dental emergency. His voice lowers as he stirs his tea. People think stationmasters love their ledgers because they enjoy control, he says. But really, it's because the ledger listens. You tilt your head. Listens how? The world outside this room moves too fast, he replies. Steam engines shout. Passengers hurry. Letters arrive late. But a ledger waits. It holds the truth quietly, word by word. He taps the cover gently. I tell it everything, and it never interrupts. You can't argue with that. Historians still argue whether these tea and ledger breaks were simply moments of rest or subtle acts of grounding rituals that allowed stationmasters to reset their minds between the chaos of train movements. But watching him now, swirling his tea, smoothing one hand down the ledger's spine, you understand it's both. A moment to breathe, a ritual of reassurance, a small, calm ceremony in a world fueled by steam. The stationmaster stands, finishing the last sip of tea, and tucks the ledger under his arm again. Time to return. The rails wait for no one, not even their keepers. He opens the office door. Fog curls around his boots like a familiar friend. Passengers murmur. Crates thump. Somewhere, a telegraph clicks impatiently. He steps onto the platform once more, and you follow, feeling slightly warmer, slightly steadier, carried forward by tea, biscuits, and the quiet company of a man who believes order can be written into the world, one inked line at a time. The afternoon light slants across the station like a pale ribbon, catching on railings, benches, and the gleaming metal of signal levers. You step out behind the stationmaster, feeling the air shift again, no longer the calm, fog-touched morning you walked through earlier, but the bustling, jangling, unpredictable heartbeat of midday rail traffic. The platform seems to inhale deeply, preparing itself. And then you hear it, a distant whistle, higher pitched than the earlier one, impatient, almost petulant. The stationmaster's eyes narrow a fraction. Ah, he murmurs. The 140, known for its personality. The train, as it turns out, is already late. You can feel the ripple this causes across the platform. Passengers begin pacing with exaggerated sighs. A telegraph boy darts toward the stationmaster, waving a crisp slip of paper like it contains news of the apocalypse which, to Victorian travellers denied punctuality, it basically does. The boy hands the note over. The stationmaster scans it. You wait for drama, tension, maybe a muttered curse under his breath. Instead, he simply lifts his ledger-holding arm, like a man performing Tai Chi with paperwork. He turns to you with calm resignation. Time for the art of gentle chaos. A mainstream historical fact clicks into place. Victorian railways had notoriously tight schedules, yet delays were extremely common. Trains shared tracks, signalling was still evolving, and weather could turn tracks into slippery hazards. Stationmasters were expected to manage frustration, confusion, and one or two angry businessmen per hour with unwavering composure. And here it comes, a wave of frustration rolling toward you in the shape of disgruntled passengers. A woman clutching 2 hat boxes approaches. Is the train delayed? Yes, madam, the station master replies smoothly. But only slightly. How slightly? She asks, dramatically widening her eyes. Precisely. A Victorian slightly. His answer is so calming and so unhelpfully vague that she simply nods and retreats. A businessman marches up next, announcing loudly that he is late for a meeting in the city. The station master nods sympathetically, as though attending that meeting is the most important duty any human has ever undertaken. You will still arrive, he says soothingly, just with additional anticipation. You whisper, does that usually work? He leans closer to you. People like their problems acknowledged. They rarely need them solved. You mentally bookmark that for your modern life. But the true test arrives when the train finally pulls into view. You brace for chaos. Steam bellows dramatically. The engine huffs like a furious metal bull. Passengers surge forward, eager to reclaim the minutes they've lost, as if boarding 2 seconds earlier might fix the timeline. And the station master? He keeps the calm of a man watering plants on a quiet Sunday afternoon. He raises the green signal paddle, directing porters into motion. One to the crates, one to the luggage cart, one to the elderly man trying to board the wrong carriage, one to the huge Newfoundland dog who has apparently decided he lives at this station now. The platform becomes a swirl of footsteps, shouts, rustling skirts, and wheels clattering. But at the center stands the station master, serene, unflappable, the quiet conductor of an orchestra mostly made of stress. A quirky tidbit floats into your head. Some Victorian newspapers joked that station masters should be recruited to mediate international diplomacy because no man alive can calm a furious English commuter, quite like the keeper of the platform. Looking at the scene before you, you start to think that wasn't really a joke. A crate nearly topples. He redirects it with one firm gesture. A child almost sprints toward the tracks. He halts the child with a single finger, raised in perfect parental authority. A vendor attempts once more to sell meat pies in forbidden areas. The station master glides toward him silently until the vendor flees like a man fleeing moral judgment. Everything flows. Everything steadies. Even the late train seems to release tension from its steel bones. Historians still argue whether station masters genuinely possessed exceptional emotional control, or whether they simply mastered the performance of calmness, the way actors perform characters, the way priests perform ceremonies. But you watch him right now, and it's clear, whether natural or learned, the stillness he radiates keeps the chaos from collapsing into something dangerous. He turns to you as the last passenger boards. Chaos is never the enemy, he says. Only the fear of it. You nod, pretending you've always known that, and didn't just learn it from a man whose job is basically politely bossing around steam engines. The station master signals the conductor. The whistle blows. The train rolls forward with a groan, then disappears into the distance, as though embarrassed for being late. The platform exhales. You didn't realize you were holding your breath until this moment. The station master tucks the ledger under his arm again. He looks perfectly composed, as if the last 15 minutes hadn't been an emotional stampede. Meanwhile, you feel like your heartbeat jumped a track somewhere. Come along, he says with quiet certainty. We still have numbers to tend. As you follow him back toward the office, you realize you've just witnessed the railway equivalent of a magic trick, not one involving sleight of hand, but slight of calm, and somehow that's even more impressive. The station feels strangely lighter after the late train's departure, like a room that's finally exhaled after hosting too many guests. You follow the station master back toward the office, boots tapping in a slower rhythm now. The frantic energy of the platform fades behind you, replaced by the familiar hush of wood, coal dust, and warm lamplight. He closes the office door gently, and the sounds of the station soften to a muffled hum. You realize something. Out there, he's commander of calm. In here, he's keeper of secrets. The ledger waits on the desk, exactly where he left it. Like a very patient dog that knows its owner always comes back. He sets it flat, takes a steadying breath, and opens it with careful fingers. This, he says quietly, is the part most people never see. You lean closer. At first glance, the page looks like the others. Neat columns, crisp headings, tidy lines of ink that march down the paper like disciplined soldiers. But as your eyes adjust, you start noticing additions, tiny curves in the margins, little shapes tucked between numbers, dots and flourishes that don't seem to belong to any arithmetic system known to humankind. You frown. Is that a fish wearing a hat? He clears his throat, not quite meeting your eyes. That is a stylized locomotive. You tilt your head. With fins? He coughs delicately and ignores the question. Your gaze drifts to a corner of the page, where a cluster of figures dips and curls. They're faint, as though someone drew them with a nearly empty pen, or in a moment of distraction. A little swirled pattern here, a star-like shape there. And, in one spot, the unmistakable outline of a tiny teacup. A mainstream historical fact surfaces. Victorian clerks and station staff were known to sneak small doodles and symbols into their ledgers, and account books sometimes out of boredom, sometimes as private jokes, sometimes as subtle commentary on the day's chaos. These marks rarely made it into official reports, but they still live on in archives, ghostly scribbles whispering, someone was here, and they were tired of numbers. The station master flips back a few pages for you. You see this? He asks, pointing to a line that ends in an odd flourish. At first, that looks like fancy handwriting, you say. At first, he agrees. But that extra coil at the end, that means the train was noisy. You blink. Noisy. Brake issues, he explains. Or a temperamental driver. Or passengers who were excessively enthusiastic about everything. He traces the curl with his fingertip. Sometimes the ledger needs subtext. You smile. So the book doesn't just record what happened, it records how it felt. He turns another page and taps a small symbol, resembling a sideways triangle with a dot in the center. That one means, someone complained loudly, but I survived. You laugh. A whole symbol just for complaining. In this line of work, he replies, it deserves its own category. A quirky tidbit swims up from your memory. In some offices, clerks developed entire informal symbol systems, a sort of private shorthand to record events that didn't fit into official categories. Things like boss in bad mood, ink spilled catastrophically, or today's numbers, probably cursed. Those little marks never appeared in training manuals, but they were passed quietly from one staff member to the next, like heirlooms of shared exasperation. You notice a faint, smudged thumbprint along one margin, the ink blurred as though someone touched it while deep in thought. Who's this from? You ask. The station master smiles faintly. My predecessor. He had a habit of pressing his thumb down when he was worried about sums. Those are his thinking prints. You run your finger just above the mark, not quite touching it. There's something strangely intimate about it, a quiet reminder that another pair of hands used to guard this station, whisper numbers into its air, and trust this ledger with the day's burdens. Do you ever add your own? You ask. He hesitates, then flips to a fresher page. At the bottom, You see a tiny, neatly drawn symbol tucked beneath the official entries, a minuscule lantern with rays etched around it. That, he says quietly, means the day was difficult, but we kept the light. Your chest warms unexpectedly. He turns toward the shelf and retrieves a different ledger, older, its binding a bit frayed, its leather faded to a softer brown. This one, he says, goes back further. He opens it carefully, and the scent of old paper and dust rises like a memory. The handwriting here is even more elaborate, letters looping like lace. But the margins are alive. There are birds, drawn with delicate ink strokes, little trains with exaggerated chimneys, winding vines that creep up the side of columns, stars, raindrops, a tiny umbrella. Someone was bored, you say softly. Someone, he corrects politely, was human. He taps one of the stars. We're fairly sure this is the mark for a night with clear skies and no disruption. You're fairly sure, you repeat. So you don't know for certain? He shuts the ledger gently. Historians still argue whether these symbols were personal quirks, secret codes, or informal weather records. Some claim they had spiritual meanings. Others insist they were just doodles made by men trying not to fall asleep at their desks. You look from one ledger to the other. The newer one feels orderly, precise, disciplined. The older one feels dreamy, as if its keeper looked at his pages as something more than just tools. Which do you prefer? You ask. The stationmaster pauses longer than you expected. His gaze lingers on the older volume. This one, he admits. It reminds me that we are not only recording trains and people, we are recording days, and no day is purely numeric. He closes the old ledger and rests his palm on the new one. I try to let a little life escape into the margins. You think back to everything you've seen today, the fog, the passengers, the platform ballet, the chaos of delays, the tiny rituals of tea and biscuits. It makes sense that all of that needs somewhere to live, somewhere safe, somewhere quiet. Maybe that's what the doodles are, life leaking into the lines. The stationmaster lifts his hand and takes up his pen again. A fresh entry awaits. The late train, the delayed departure, the adjusted timetable. He writes the facts first, neat numbers, crisp times, clear details. Then, at the end of the line, he adds the smallest curve of ink, a symbol, a feeling, a memory of how the day actually felt. You watch the motion and think, even in a world of steel and schedules, a man can still write softness into the margins. And suddenly, you understand another reason why Victorian stationmasters loved their ledgers. Because in those quiet, ink-blotted corners, they could be both record keepers and storytellers. The stationmaster closes the heavily inked ledger with the same tenderness someone else might use to tuck in a sleeping child. The soft thump of its cover meeting the pages seems to seal not only numbers, but feelings, tiny emotional footnotes pressed into the day's official record. He gestures for you to follow him outside again. Come, he says. Passengers are waiting to be written. You step onto the platform, where the air has shifted yet again. The fog is gone now, replaced by a crisp brightness that makes every color sharper, every voice clearer. The afternoon trains will arrive soon, and already the passengers have begun to assemble a beautiful, chaotic parade of humanity that seems to restlessly orbit Victorian railway stations, like moths around lamplight. You never realized until now how much the stationmaster notices. Not just trains, not just times, but people. He stands at the edge of the platform, ledger tucked under his arm, scanning the crowd with a quiet attentiveness that feels both gentle and deeply observant. Every passenger, he murmurs, is a footnote waiting for its place. You raise an eyebrow. Footnote? Not an entry? A line, he says, is official. A footnote is remembered. And then you begin seeing the station the way he does. There's the tall man, with the fraying gloves, anxiously checking the pocket watch he cannot quite afford, probably traveling for work, probably new to the city, probably worried he'll miss something important. The station master watches him with a soft understanding before marking a discreet symbol in the corner of his ledger page, a tiny dot. Hesitant traveler, he explains. Nearby, a young woman in a flowered shawl clutches a large book, an early novel, its pages visibly worn. She reads while walking, somehow avoiding every obstacle with divine instinct. She boards the 310 every week, the station master whispers. Her footnotes are always happy ones. A group of schoolboys barrels down the platform, laughing loud enough to qualify as a noise ordinance violation. Their boots thump in unruly rhythm. One nearly collides with a porter, who dodges at the last second like a seasoned matador. The station master taps his ledger again. Energetic chaos. Footnotes in motion. A mainstream historical fact surfaces in your memory. Victorian stations weren't just transport hubs, they were social theatres. People watched each other constantly, reading clothing, posture, accent, and luggage the way modern commuters watch their phones. For many Victorians, the railway platform was one of the few places where different classes, professions, and personalities brushed shoulders. And the station master? He had a front row seat to all of it. As another cluster of passengers gathers by a bench, he points subtly. That family there, they travel often. The father is punctual to the minute. The mother always carries a basket of sweets she never eats. The children think the railway exists solely for their entertainment. You glance at the ledger. Are you writing all this? He smiles. Of course not. The ledger is for trains. But I remember the lives. You nod slowly. You hadn't expected this job to be part psychologist, part sociologist, part overly polite shepherd of wandering Victorians. But here you are. A quirky tidbit floats to the surface. In some stations, station masters became so familiar with regular passengers that they predicted personal events, marriages, job changes, even quarrels based solely on shifts in posture or new types of luggage. Some wrote informal, character notes, not in official ledgers, but in personal diaries that later became hidden gems for historians. Looking at your station master, you suspect he'd have filled entire volumes. A sudden commotion catches your attention. A man rushes onto the platform waving a paper, an envelope sealed with wax. Breathless, he nearly skids into the station master. Telegraph delay, he gasps. The station master reads the paper calmly. The 310 has been rerouted. Only a few minutes difference, but enough to spark emotional fireworks among punctual Victorians. You brace for complaints, accusations, perhaps a fainting spell. But instead, the station master steps forward and begins the gentle redistribution of calm. He explains the change to each passenger with a tone so soothing he could easily narrate spa advertisements. He reassures the tall man with the fraying gloves. He helps the young woman with the novel find a quieter waiting spot. He redirects the schoolboys away from the platform edge with the subtle authority of a man who has raised exactly 0 children, but has supervised hundreds. Historians still argue whether the station master's role was primarily administrative or psychological, but watching him now, it's clear. The man is a lighthouse for frazzled commuters. Once the crowd settles again, he opens the ledger and writes a few crisp lines. 310 delayed passenger flow, stable minimal disruption. But at the bottom of the entry, he adds a tiny flourish, a small curved line, like a smile. What does that mean, you ask? He closes the ledger gently. It means that despite the inconvenience, people were kind today. You feel something warm in your chest, a small, glowing certainty. This job isn't about trains. Not really. It's about people, their stories, their habits, their anxieties, their hopes. The ledger records what happens. The station master records who happens. And now you understand why Victorian station masters loved their ledgers. Because they weren't just books of numbers. They were mirrors of days, of crowds, of human rhythms that trains merely carried from place to place. The station master moves toward the platform edge again, ready for the next wave. And this time, you see it. He doesn't serve the trains, he serves the stories. The afternoon grows older in that quiet, unnoticed way time always seems to age in public places. Shadows lengthen along the tracks, light softens on the station roof, and somewhere in the slow shift of the day, you start to notice something you hadn't really listened to before. The sounds, not just noise in the background, but layers, threads, tiny sonic patterns, weaving in and out of each other like a railway symphony. The station master notices you pausing near the platform edge, head tilted, brow slightly furrowed. He steps up beside you, ledger under one arm, and follows your gaze, but you're not really looking anymore. You're listening. Good, he says quietly. You're hearing it now. Hearing what? You ask. He gestures gently at the rails, the platform planks, the roof beams, the distant telegraph wires humming along their posts. All of it, he replies, the station talking to itself. You close your eyes for a moment and let the sounds gather. There's the sharp clack of a porter's boots echoing under the canopy, the soft rustle of skirts and coats brushing past each other, the muted thud of a trunk being set down carefully by someone who respects its weight, the faint chime of a clock in the ticket office, marking off another precise minute, the telegraph tapping in bursts behind its window, like a metallic heartbeat full of secrets, and beneath it all, like a low, ever-present drum, the rails themselves hum vibrations traveling farther than your eyes can see. A mainstream historical fact floats into your mind. Victorian railway workers, especially station masters and engine drivers, relied heavily on sound to interpret what was happening. Before sophisticated signalling, hums, clanks, hisses, and whistles weren't just background, they were warnings, confirmations, and sometimes the only early clues that something was wrong. The railway wasn't just seen, it was heard. The station master lifts his chin, listening too. There, he says softly. Do you hear that? You strain your ears. At first, all you catch is the low murmur of conversation. Then you pick up something else. A rhythmic, hollow clatter, somewhere down the track, not close yet, but moving toward you. Empty freight wagons, he explains. You can hear the difference. Passenger coaches sound fuller, warmer. Freight rattles. You blink. You'd never thought about the temperature of sound before. He smiles faintly. When you spend enough years on a platform, sounds stop being background and start being information. You both stand in silence for a while, just listening. A train passes in the distance, not at your station but somewhere along the shared rails, its deep rumble rolling like distant thunder. The telegraph taps a frantic little flurry and then rests. A gull cries overhead, somehow both majestic and mildly annoyed. The station master taps his ledger lightly. Paper needs rhythm, he says. Ink needs rhythm. I write better when I hear the station properly. You look at him. You mean the sounds tell you what to write? In a way. He nods toward the office. Come, I'll show you. Back inside, the office feels like a listening chamber. The window is open just a crack, letting in just enough sound to remind you you're not alone, but not so much that it overwhelms. The station master sits, opens the ledger, and waits. He doesn't start writing immediately. Instead, he places his hand flat on the desk, fingers relaxed, and lets the sounds outside wash over him. The faint clatter of a barrow, the distant hiss of a boiler cooling, the rhythmic tick of the wall clock. Then his fingers begin to tap in time with the noises. a soft, almost musical tapping. Tap, tick, tap, tap, tick. You see? He says calmly. The station provides a metronome. I borrow it. He begins to write. His pen strokes fall into rhythm with the soundscape. Long lines during the smooth rumble of passing wheels. Short, precise notes between the punctuated ticks of the clock. There's a strange harmony to it. You realize he isn't just recording events. He's matching the ledger to the tempo of the world outside. A quirky tidbit surfaces in your thoughts. Some clerks and station workers reportedly developed sound habits while they wrote, tapping out beats with their feet, syncing their pen strokes to familiar noises, or pausing mid-sentence if a sound pattern felt wrong. There are old anecdotes of ledgers mysteriously stopping mid-line because a train passed with an unusual rattle, spooking the writer into checking the rails before finishing their sentence. Efficiency? Questionable. Survival instinct? Maybe. The station master underlines a time entry with a stroke that lands perfectly on the clock's tick. It's weirdly satisfying. Do you ever find it distracting? You ask. He lifts one shoulder in a gentle shrug. At first, yes. When I was new, the sounds were all shouting at once. Steam here, shouting there, telegraph everywhere. But after a while, they learned to behave. They learned to behave. You repeat. He gives you a look that clearly says, obviously. Now, he continues, the sounds tell me when to pause, when to hurry, when to check the window. If the clatter changes, if the hum alters, if the telegraph stutters, I know something is different before anyone else does. Historians still argue whether this kind of sound attunement was formal training or something station masters simply acquired over years of exposure. Some say manuals emphasized visual checks and timekeeping only. Others insist informal mentorships pass down the art of listening to the rails from one generation to the next. Whatever the case, you're seeing the outcome, a man whose ears are as important as his eyes. He writes another line, then pauses mid-word. Your breath catches. You don't know what he heard, but you heard it too, the slight shift outside. The barrow sound stopped. The murmur of voices thinned. A new rhythm approached. Measured, steady footsteps echoing closer. Inspector, he murmurs. Sure enough, the office door opens a moment later, and an inspector steps in, coat sharp, eyes sharper, clipboard in hand. He nods curtly at the ledger, clearly here to check something. The station master doesn't fluster. He simply turns the book around, presenting neat columns that match, perfectly, the sounds of the day. The inspector scans, pauses, nods. No errors, he says. Impressive. The station master doesn't smirk, but you sense he wants to. When the inspector leaves, you exhale. You knew it was him from his footsteps. The inspectors, he says dryly, always walk like they're late for their own standards. You laugh, and the sound threads into the office's soft soundscape. Another little note added to the day's music. He goes back to writing, letting the station's chorus continue to guide his pen. You sit quietly, attuning your own ears in the same way. The clack of boots, the sigh of wind against glass, the distant, echoing whistle of a train that doesn't even stop here but still belongs to this place somehow. And somewhere between all those sounds, you begin to feel what the station master has always known, that the ledger isn't just a written record of events, it's a transcription of the station's song. You watch the ink dry slowly, hearing its rhythm as clearly as the ticking clock, and you think, maybe that's why the pages feel alive. The evening light begins to settle low across the station, brushing gold against brick, rail, window, and coat button. It's the kind of hour that makes everything feel a little softer, a little slower, as if the world is politely winding down rather than crashing into sunset the way some places seem to do. You stretch your fingers near the open window, the cool air brushing across your knuckles. and the station master glances up from his ledger with a studying expression. You hear better when you feel the air change, he says. Most people forget that. He stands and motions for you to follow, leading you out of the office and back into the open platform. The station feels quieter than before, though not empty. It's the hour when travelers speak in gentler voices, when porters conserve their steps, and when even luggage seems to sit politely. Come on, the station master murmurs. There's something you should collect before the day ends. Collect, you echo. He taps the ledger lightly. Numbers aren't enough. A station master with only numbers is just a clerk with a better view. You need something else. You're not sure whether to be intimidated or charmed by that. It's a fine line with him. You walk together toward a small annex you hadn't noticed earlier. It's tucked behind the main platform structure, half shadowed, half forgotten. Inside, the air smells faintly of coal dust and wood polish. And on one long shelf, running the length of the wall, are dozens, no, hundreds of small objects. Buttons, scraps of paper, ticket stubs, snapped bits of iron, worn-down pencil stubs, fragments of old station signs, screws too bent to reuse. The station master rests his hand on the shelf. These, he says quietly, are from the years before this ledger. You stare. You kept all of it? Of course. His eyebrows lift slightly. A ledger tells you what happened, but found things tell you who it happened to. A mainstream historical fact surfaces immediately. Many Victorian station masters were unofficial archivists of their stations, keeping personal collections of odd items left behind, some sentimental, some practical, some completely inexplicable. Few of these micro-archives survived intact, but diaries mention them, sometimes fondly, sometimes baffled. They were memory boxes for places that never slept. The station master picks up a small, circular metal button. It's dented, scratched, and utterly unremarkable, but his thumb moves across it with a strange tenderness. A guard dropped this the day he retired, he says. He shrugged and said he was leaving pieces of himself behind. I thought he was joking, but his smile turns thoughtful. I think he was right. He sets it down and gestures for you to walk the shelf. You pick up a torn ticket stub, London to Norwich, 3rd class. The edges are soft, the ink slightly smudged. Someone must have gripped it tightly, maybe out of nerves or excitement. There's a small scrap of blue ribbon, a cracked telegraph key that clearly saw a dramatic fall, a wooden whistle worn smooth with years of pocket use, a page torn from a timetable, folded into a tiny square like a secret message. What do I do with them? You ask after a moment. Nothing, he says. Just notice them. The ledger records trains and times. These, he gestures again, record the world around those trains. A quirky tidbit drifts into your memory. Some Victorian travellers believed that objects left behind in stations absorbed the spirit of motion, making them lucky charms for future journeys. There are old tales of people keeping scrap metal or broken ticket punches as tokens that supposedly guaranteed smooth travel. Whether true or not, they were cherished enough to show up in collections exactly like this. You run your fingertips along the shelf, letting the textures guide you. Cold metal, soft paper, rough wood, smooth glass. Each item feels like a whisper, a fragment of a story you'll never fully hear but can somehow still sense. The station master watches with a quiet, approving nod. You're learning, he says. A good station master isn't just a keeper of time. They're a keeper of traces. You pause. Traces? Yes. Marks left behind. Not big, heroic ones. The small things people don't think matter. He shrugs lightly. But I've always believed the world is built from things people don't think matter. He taps the ledger under his arm. Numbers matter, but moments matter too, rarely at the same volume. You feel that. He picks up a small iron screw from the shelf, bent, rusted, useless except as a paperweight. This, he says, came loose from the north signal post during a storm. I heard the change in the wind and came out to look. Found it halfway down the track. You kept it, you ask? Of course. I keep anything the station gives me. You're starting to realize he isn't joking. Historians still argue whether Victorian station masters kept these collections out of sentiment, superstition, boredom, or simply because they spent so much time in one place that they grew attached to its debris. Some scholars suggest the collections were coping mechanisms for stressful jobs. Others claim they were proto-museums, and some insist they were just, well, clutter. The station master rests the screw back in place with surprising gentleness. Then he turns to you. Pick one. One what? One item. Something that speaks to you. You hesitate because everything here feels fragile, precious. But then you notice something near the end of the shelf. A small pebble, river-smoothed, sitting beside the scraps and metal pieces, like it wandered in by accident. You pick it up. It's warm from the sunlight that sneaks through the annex window, small enough to hide in your palm, perfectly ordinary, and somehow comforting. He smiles knowingly. That one's from a boy who waited every Sunday for his father to return on the evening train. He'd collect a pebble each week to mark the visit, and he left this one behind. Or he outgrew the ritual, the station master says softly. But the station remembered it. You hold the pebble longer than necessary. Then the station master places a small slip of paper beside you. Write what you think it means. I thought you did the writing, you tease gently. I do, he says, but the station doesn't belong only to me. You write a single word. Patience. He nods. Good. That's a ledger of its own. As you leave the annex, pebble in hand, the evening station stretches quiet and warm around you. The rails glow like long threads of molten copper. The clock ticks, the telegraph hums, and you realize that maybe the station master was right. Some things are meant to be written, others are meant to be held, and sometimes the smallest object holds the largest memory. The moment you step back onto the platform, the station feels different again, like the world has shifted quietly while you were in the annex, touching tiny scraps of forgotten lives. The light has softened even further, spreading itself thin across iron rails and wooden benches. A gentle breeze moves through, carrying the faint scent of coal dust, old varnish, and the cool promise of night. The station master pauses beside you, eyes drifting toward the distant horizon. Evening is when the station tells its truth, he murmurs. Fewer trains, fewer people, more honesty. You're starting to suspect he speaks in cryptic poetry on purpose. He walks toward the main signal box, and you follow. The wooden steps creak under your boots. Inside, the room is warm from the lingering heat of lanterns and bodies. Brass levers line the wall, each polished to an almost emotional shine. A large window looks out over the tracks, giving a perfect view of rails that seem to disappear into the settling dusk. The station master gestures for you to stand beside him. Most people think signal levers are about control, he says, but really, they're about timing. You nod, because that sounds sufficiently wise despite having no idea what it means. He places his hand on one lever, the largest, marked with a smudge from countless other hands. This one, he explains, shifts the points for the night freight. You'll hear it before you see it. You listen. At first, there's nothing. Then a faint rumble. Then a hum. Then the kind of vibration that feels like a heartbeat made of steel. The station master pulls the lever slowly, with the grace of someone pouring tea in absolute silence. The mechanism clicks, shifts, settles. Outside, the rails adjust with a low, echoing note that feels almost like a sigh. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your awareness. Victorian signal systems relied heavily on manual operation, with station masters and signalmen communicating through bells, flags, and coded pulls. It demanded full attention. A single missed cue could mean disaster. Yet the system functioned for decades with remarkable reliability, thanks to people like the man standing beside you. The station master leans closer. Listen again. This time, you hear it clearly, the rhythmic clatter of a distant freight train approaching. Slow, steady, heavy with cargo. As it rolls closer, lanterns flicker across its dark silhouette, illuminating the plumes of steam curling upward like ghosts stretching after a long rest. Will it stop here? You ask. He shakes his head. No, but it still needs guidance. The freight thunders past the platform, not slowing, not wavering, rolling straight into the night like a creature that knows exactly where it's going. You feel the rumble deep in your ribs, and you feel, strangely, responsible for it, even though all you did was stand nearby while the station master moved a lever. He glances at you with a faint smile. Everything here depends on the quiet work. You get the feeling he means more than just the railway. After the freight disappears, the station falls into a deeper calm. No voices, no whistles, just the tick-tick of the station clock and the occasional rustle of wind against the windows. The station master reaches into a drawer and pulls out a thin notebook, its cover worn and softened by years of use. This, he says, is my unofficial ledger. You have a second ledger? You ask, startled. He chuckles. Of course. One for the company, one for the station. That sounds illegal. Only if someone finds it. And they never do. He flips it open, revealing pages covered with small, neat handwriting. But these entries are nothing like the crisp numbers of the official ledger. They're personal notes. The 7:10 carried a family with a wooden rocking horse. A storm delayed 3 trains, but passengers told stories to pass the time. Found a child's mitten in the snow. Kept it. They're not records, they're memories. Station masters weren't required to keep books like this, he says quietly, but many did. It reminded us that we weren't just moving trains, we were moving lives. A quirky tidbit emerges in your thoughts. Surviving diaries from Victorian station masters often contain charmingly mundane observations. Notes about cats who lived under the platform, about regular travellers' fashion choices, about the exact moment daisies first appeared by the tracks each spring. Scholars sometimes call these whisper records, because they capture the soft details lost to official history. The station master closes the notebook. You keep one too, he says, in your head. You just don't realize it yet. Do I? He nods. All day you've watched, you've listened, you've noticed. That's the first step. You look out the window again. The rails shine faintly under the emerging stars. Lanterns glow warm and steady along the platform. The station breathes in slow, rhythmic drafts of cool evening air. Historians still argue whether the emotional intuition of Victorian station masters was an intentional part of their training, or simply a side effect of spending every day in a place where time, movement, and memory converged. But watching him now calm, steady, quietly reflective, you suspect it wasn't taught, it was absorbed. The station master drags a stool over and gestures for you to sit. He sits beside you, both of you facing the night. You know, he says after a long moment, people think the dramatic moments define a station, the arrivals, the departures, the big mistakes, the big saves. And they don't? You ask. No. He folds his hands. It's the in-between moments, the ones nobody pays attention to, the small silences, the unnoticed rituals, the quiet choices that shape everything, without ever being recorded. He glances at you again, as if expecting you to catch something important. So, he continues softly, what did you learn today? You hesitate, then you answer honestly. That small things matter. He nods slowly. Good. That's the lesson most people miss. The station seems to hum, in agreement, rails cooling, lanterns flickering, wooden beams settling, the great machinery of the day easing itself into rest. You sit together in peaceful silence, Just a station master, his apprentice, and the soft clockwork of a place built on movement, yet held together by stillness. Night settles over the station in a gentle, blue-tinged hush, not sudden, not dramatic, just a slow unfurling of shadow over brick, rail, and rooftop. Lanterns glow warmer against the growing dark, their light turning syrupy and soft, as if even the flames are winding down for the evening. You and the station master step back onto the quiet platform, the boards creaking faintly beneath your boots. The sky above you deepens into a velvety navy, pricked with the first confident stars. The station master inhales the cool air like it's something he's been waiting for all day. Night, he murmurs, is when a station truly keeps itself. You follow him toward the far end of the platform, where a small hut sits, lantern hanging from a hook outside. The hut looks unimportant, almost neglected. You'd walked past it earlier without a second glance, but now, with the lantern glowing like a sleepy firefly, it seems to beckon quietly. This is the night report hut, he explains, where all the day's numbers learn how to behave. You arch a brow. Numbers behave. He gives you a look that says yes, obviously. Where have you been this whole time? Inside, the hut is surprisingly cozy. A small desk, a chair, a stack of blank forms, another ledger, this one slimmer than the others, and a brass inkstand shaped like a tiny owl. The owl's eyes gleam knowingly. The whole place smells like old paper and cool wood, with a hint of coal smoke drifting in from the platform. This, the station master says, tapping the night ledger, is where the day becomes history. You sit down opposite him, feeling strangely honored. The station outside murmurs softly track metal cooling, wind nudging loose bits of grain dust, a distant dog barking as if complaining about the lateness of the hour. The station master opens the night ledger. It is filled with lines of tidy handwriting, times, notes, observations, small corrections, nothing flashy, yet somehow everything important. The night ledger, he says, isn't as strict as the daytime one. You glance at him. How so? He smiles, leaning in like he's sharing a secret. In this book, I get to tell the truth. A mainstream historical fact edges into your awareness. Many Victorian stations kept unofficial night logs, written in a more personal tone. These records sometimes revealed how station masters truly felt about delays, difficult passengers, mechanical troubles, or unexpected kindnesses. They were professional documents but also human ones. You watch as he writes. 7:12 arrived without incident. Guard in good spirits. 1:40 arrived late but left calmer than expected. Learner shows promise. Notices silence as much as sound. You blink. Wait. I'm in there. Of course. He continues writing without looking up. Anyone who tends the rhythm of the station becomes part of the station's memory. Your chest warms for no logical reason. He gestures for you to take the pen. Your turn. You freeze. My turn too. What? To write the day as you saw it. He shrugs lightly. No wrong answers, only honest ones. You take the pen heavier than you expect and stare at the blank line. Your handwriting wobbles a little as you write. Evening freight sounded like a heartbeat. Platform felt calmer after the late train left. The pebble still feels warm. The station master reads your words and nods with quiet satisfaction. Good. Very good. The lantern flickers, casting soft golden tremors across the walls. Outside, a faint wind whistles under the eaves with the gentlest sigh. The entire station feels like it is settling in for sleep. A quirky tidbit stirs in your mind. Some older station masters claimed the night ledger kept the station safe, almost like a charm. One insisted that writing down the day's events prevented the tracks from forgetting their duty. Superstition? Probably. But looking at the station master recording his notes with such reverence, you begin to understand how these beliefs existed. He closes the ledger gently, smoothing the cover with the palm of his hand. "And now," he says softly, "the ritual, the ritual," you repeat, worried you're about to be forced into a Victorian trust fall. He reaches up and adjusts the lantern flame. Not brighter, softer. The room dims to a warm glow. "Every night," he explains, "a station master walks the length of the platform. Not for safety, not for duty, just to let the station know it hasn't been abandoned." "That's oddly sweet," you admit. He picks up a small brass key from the desk, nods for you to follow, and steps out into the cooling night. The two of you walk side by side. Boards creak. Rails gleam faintly like silver threads stitched through the dark. The clock tower chimes softly in the distance, its tone carrying like a lullaby. You feel the platform breathe steady, comforting, familiar. Historians still argue whether these nightly walks were official protocol or simply traditions handed down through habit and sentiment. Some claim they aided safety checks, others insist they served no purpose at all. But walking here, with the station master matching his steps to the station's quiet rhythm, you can feel the purpose in your bones. This is not about duty, it's about belonging. When you reach the far end of the platform, the station master pauses, looks out at the darkened tracks, and murmurs something you can't quite hear. Not a prayer, not a report, but something softer. Maybe a thank you, maybe a good night. He turns back toward you, with a warm, tired smile. "The station sleeps now," he says, "and soon, so will we." And as you walk back with him, lantern light trailing behind like a comforting halo, you realize you've begun to love this quiet place of numbers, traces, rituals, and rails. The station lies fully under night now, wrapped in a calm so complete it feels almost like a held breath. The lanterns burn low and steady, casting halos of soft gold around iron pillars and wooden benches. Even the rails seem to rest, their metal glow muted beneath the star-washed sky. You stand beside the station master, near the center of the platform, where the boards are worn smooth by years of footsteps, hurried, hopeful, exhausted, ordinary. "This," he says quietly, "is the hour when the station forgets it is busy." You feel the truth of that immediately. No rumbling carriages, no impatient boots, no vendors calling out wares, just quiet, layered, and deep. He leads you to a small bench near the telegraph window. From here, you can see almost everything, the stretch of track fading into darkness, the signal posts standing like sentinels, the outline of the station roof against the sky. A faint scent of coal lingers in the air, softened now, mellowed by evening. "Sit," he murmurs, lowering himself beside you. A station master must know how to be still. You sit, letting the quiet settle over your shoulders like a warm coat. For a long, comfortable moment, neither of you speaks. The night does the talking instead. A distant owl hoots. The station clock ticks in steady, sleepy rhythm. Somewhere, a lonely piece of loose sheet metal flutters in the wind, and then gives up entirely, lying flat with a sigh. "You've learned the ledgers," the station master finally says. "You've learned the signals. You've learned the traces and the rituals." He pauses, then glances sideways at you. "Now you learn the secret." Your brain immediately panics. What secret? Is there a hidden basement? A mystical timetable? A haunted pigeon? He leans forward, elbows on his knees. The station isn't really about trains. You blink. Hard. It's not? No. His smile is warm, soft around the edges. It's about waiting. The word lands gently, like a feather. A station, he continues, is built on moments between things. People arrive before something begins. People leave after something ends. There is always waiting, always the in-between, and someone must hold that space. Not control it, just hold it. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your thoughts. Victorian rail stations were as much social hubs as travel points, places where people lingered, gathered, paced, read newspapers, shared news, or simply rested. Stationmasters weren't just managers. They were caretakers of a public threshold, guiding not just movement, but mood. You breathe in the cool night air, letting the realization settle. So, he asks gently, do you understand? You exhale slowly. I think so. You keep time, but you also keep the pauses. He nods, pleased. Exactly. He stands, stretching slightly, joints cracking in that dignified Victorian way that suggests the bones themselves are wearing waistcoats. Now come, one last small duty. You follow him toward the east end of the platform, where an old iron signal lamp hangs from a hook. Earlier, it was bright green, guiding a late afternoon train. Now, it glows faintly, shading towards soft amber. This lamp stays lit, he says. Not for trains none will pass now, but for travelers who arrive after dark. Do many come at this hour? Not many, he says. But one person needing light is enough reason to keep it burning. He adjusts the wick gently until the flame steadies. The glow spreads across the boards around your feet, brushing them in warm, honeyed colour. A quirky tidbit floats to mind. Some rural Victorian stations believed an ever-burning lamp kept away misfortune. Others insisted it welcomed friendly spirits. Still others claimed it simply helped passengers avoid tripping over toolboxes. Historians still argue which origin is correct, but all agree the lamps stayed lit well past practical necessity. Now you, he says, stepping aside. You lift the lamp carefully, feeling the subtle weight of iron and glass. The flame wavers, then recovers, glowing with soft confidence. You hang it back on its hook. It glimmers like a tiny promise against the night. Well done, the station master murmurs. You've kept the final ritual. The two of you walk back toward the center of the platform again. Steps slow, unrushed. The station feels even quieter now. Not empty, but peacefully full of everything that has happened today. The comings, goings, mishaps, delays, calm words, passing storms of human emotion, all of it folded neatly into the stillness of night. You look up at the station master. Doesn't it ever feel lonely, being the one who holds the in-between? He shakes his head. Not lonely, just gentle. He pauses, considering. Someone must tend the quiet. It's good work, honest work. You nod, and for the first time today, you feel yourself agreeing with him completely. The night deepens. The lanterns glow. The station sighs into rest. You've done well, he says, turning toward the office. Tomorrow, you'll learn even more. You smile. Will it be difficult? Oh, certainly, he replies. But difficulty is easier when you are unhurried. He opens the office door, warm light spilling into the cool darkness. You step inside with him, feeling the steady comfort of walls, paper, ink, wood, and the faint smell of tea lingering in the air. And as the station settles fully into sleep, you realize something lovely. You've come to care for this quiet place, and it has quietly begun to care for you. The station quiets into something even softer than silence, a kind of gentle stillness that seems to wrap itself around the rafters, the rails, and even your own breath. The lantern outside the office glows like a warm ember, steady and comforting, its small flame swaying just enough to remind you that the world is still turning, still breathing, still carrying you along at a pace slow enough to ease your thoughts. You settle onto the worn wooden bench near the office window, feeling every grain of the wood beneath your fingertips, smooth from decades of waiting travelers. The night air drifting through the cracked window is cool, almost silky, and it carries with it the faint scent of coal smoke fading into the distance. Somewhere along the tracks, Metal cools with a soft, ticking rhythm, like a heartbeat winding down after a long day. The station master moves quietly around the office, closing ledgers, capping ink bottles, and lowering the flame of the smaller desk lamp until it becomes just a murmur of light. His movements are unhurried, gentle, almost ceremonial, as though each task signals to the station that it can finally rest. When he finishes, he leans against the doorway, arms folded loosely, watching the dim platform with an expression you've come to understand as peaceful vigilance. Outside, the wind softens into a whisper. The last bit of warmth from the lantern drifts across your cheek, and your shoulders sink just a little deeper into relaxation. The rails stretch into darkness like thin silver threads disappearing into a dream, and you imagine them humming faintly with the memory of every train that passed today. You inhale slowly, you exhale even slower. Here, in this quiet station kept alive by gentleness and routine, the world feels manageable, warm, safe, ready to let go. And so are you,